They were supposed to be the steel fist that punched a hole through Russia's fortress of trenches. Western tanks rolling into Ukraine like the cavalry in a war movie, turret stabilization humming, thermal sights burning through the fog, crews as calm as surgeons. And for a moment, the world believed the old battlefield truth would hold. Where tanks go, victory follows. But the war ripped up the rulebook. Drones began to buzz like angry hornets. Artillery reached farther, faster, and smarter. The battlefield turned into a glass table. Anything moving above it could be seen and struck. The question hanging over Ukraine and over the future of armoured warfare changed from how many tanks to can tanks even survive out there? Let's rewind to the promise. In early 2023, after months of political drama that could have sold out a Netflix miniseries, the Leopard 2s, Challenger 2s, and yes, America's M1 Abrams finally started arriving. It wasn't the mythical 1% of Western tanks that Kyiv had begged for at NATO's highest tables, but it was enough to raise eyebrows in Moscow and morale in Ukraine. The script you saw then talked about why these machines mattered: firepower, protection, and the cold-blooded arithmetic of survivability. Now we're taking that story and dragging it through 2 more brutal years, into a world where a $600 FPV drone can stalk a $6 million tank. Because the story didn't end when the tanks arrived. That's when it got complicated. First, the headline you can't skip. In April 2024, US-made M1A1 Abrams were pulled back from the front after at least 5 were lost. Not scrapped, not mothballed, but no longer prowling exposed fields where Orlan spotters and Lancet drones could cue strikes like an on-demand delivery app. The Pentagon and Ukrainian commanders judged the drone threat too intense for heavy armour to wander without layered cover. It became a tactical pause to rethink how, where, and when you risk 60 to 70 tons of irreplaceable steel. The move made sense. It also punched the internet's hot take button for weeks. Tanks weren't dead, but they were out of their old job description. At the same time, the Leopard 1A5 saga taught everyone a painful lesson in logistics. Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands did the right thing. Opened the warehouses, refurbished the classics, and shipped them. But the Leopard 1s had been sitting for decades. Seals dry out, wiring ages, tolerances drift. Several batches needed more work than planned, with spare parts and trained maintainers still catching up. Ukraine even refused a shipment in 2023 because the vehicles weren't ready for combat and Kyiv didn't want dead weight on the railhead. That wasn't ingratitude, it was battlefield triage. Over time, the pipeline improved, and well over 100 Leopard 1A5s have made it into Ukrainian service. But the hiccups proved a rule as old as armour. For every tank at the front, there's a shadow army of mechanics, machinists, and trucks. No sustainment, no steel fist. Meanwhile, the top-tier Leopards kept coming. Germany's 2A6s, Norway's 2A4s, Portugal, Poland, Spain. Europe found a way to turn a diplomatic debate into armoured brigades. Denmark and the Netherlands even paid Rheinmetall to overhaul 14 2A4s for Ukraine. Another 10 2A4s came from Spain in 2024, on top of earlier deliveries. These aren't museum pieces. They're credible main battle tanks with excellent optics and guns that put rounds exactly where the gunner wants them. They've been hit, fixed, hit again, and returned to the line. You can't measure their impact only by how many platoons charge at dawn. Their mere existence forces Russia to respect sectors, to position anti-tank reserves, to spend missiles and attention. In war, attention is a currency too. On the British side, Challenger 2s earned a strange 2-part legacy. A first ever combat loss, historic for all the wrong reasons, and a reputation among Ukrainian crews as lifesavers when used judiciously undercover. A cornet and later drones showed the behemoth could be killed. That's true of every tank ever built, but crews also praise its protection and gun handling when the mission is chosen wisely. The problem was never that Western tanks are fragile. The problem is that 2025's battlefield punishes anything it can see for too long, without hard-kill defences and a protective bubble of jammers, decoys, infantry screens, and counter-battery fire. Even the best armour in the world dreads being filmed by a quadcopter that's basically a flying rangefinder for artillery. As for Abrams, a plot twist from far away. Australia committed 49 surplus M1A1 AIM tanks, with deliveries ramping in 2025. That matters. It backfills Ukrainian armoured brigades at a moment when the US fleet inside Ukraine is being husbanded and retasked. The gesture also signals something bigger. Armoured coalitions aren't just a European story anymore. When Canberra ships steel halfway around the planet, it says this war's outcome is global business. Now, if you're wondering whether tanks failed in Ukraine, breathe. Tanks did what they've always done. They magnified the quality of the combined arms team around them. In summer 2023, some Western formations tried to brute force mine belts under a sky full of drones and loitering munitions. That wasn't a tank problem, that was an era problem. The battlefield had become transparent, and breaching required exquisite orchestration, EW to blind drones, air defences to swat them, artillery to silence launchers, engineers to cut lanes, and armour to surge only when the window opened. When any one piece lagged, the tanks paid the bill. Armoured warfare didn't die, it demanded a new sheet music. Rusi's fieldwork through 2024 to 2025 shows tanks still matter, just often as ambush predators, mobile pillboxes, or precision hammers behind camouflage, not as highway sprinters in the open. And yes, there's the drone elephant in the room. By 2025, multiple assessments suggest drones are responsible for the majority of equipment losses on both sides. Cheap FPVs and one-way attack UAVs have turned the top of a tank into premium real estate for every mad scientist cage, screen, and slat the frontline welders can imagine. Some cope cages work for particular threats, many don't. They can snag branches, trap heat, block hatches. Still, crews keep welding because the alternative is sitting under a quadcopter with a shaped charge. The real fix is layered. EW bubbles, hard-kill active protection, decoys, and doctrinal changes that keep armour hidden until the decisive minute. That's the hard but hopeful lesson. Tanks are becoming nodes in an electronic and kinetic shield wall, not soloists. Let's talk specifics, starting with the Leopard 1A5. It's light by modern standards, with a 105mm gun that's still deadly when the fire control system is healthy and the crew is trained. In Ukrainian hands, the 1A5 found a niche: quick reaction fires, supporting infantry, and exploiting opportunities without soaking up the punishment that a 70-ton 2A6 can take. Analysts disagree on how many are running at any given time. What's consistent is that when they're maintained and paired with good tactics, they shoot straight and move fast. This isn't a Hollywood duel at 1,500 meters with T-90s. It's more often a war of angles, tree lines, and shoot and scoot. The Leopard 1 isn't a relic, it's a tool, with the caveat that tools need spare parts and trained hands. The Leopard 2 family, 2A4, 2A5/STRV-122, 2A6, remains the most balanced tank Ukraine fields. Accurate gun, excellent sights, strong armour. Losses have happened, especially among older armour packages like the 2A4. They were always going to happen in a theatre where a quadcopter swarm can paint your roof while a Lancet hunts your weak spots. But European armies and industry didn't freeze. Germany inked orders for the 2A8, integrating improved protection and moving toward APS integration as a standard. That next step, normalizing trophy-like hard-kill systems on European MBTs, is the difference between tanks with cages and tanks with force fields. We're not there at scale yet. The direction is clear. Challenger 2 deserves a paragraph for its gun alone. The 120mm rifled L30 asks for special ammo, which complicates logistics in a NATO that otherwise standardized on smoothbore. But that rifled gun has given Ukrainian crews some pinpoint first-round hits that feel like a sniper on tracks. The cost is weight, maintenance, and a unique sustainment chain. In small numbers, the British tanks were never going to change the war by themselves. Used with care, they changed a few battles. That's not nothing. It's also exactly how armor works in the drone era. Precision punches, not marathon brawls. And the Abrams? Ukraine's experience crystallized a truth often buried in YouTube comments. What makes an Abrams terrifying isn't just the tank, it's the American ecosystem around it. Satellite queuing, layered air defense, near-bottomless spares, and a logistics ballet honed over decades. Ukraine is building that playbook in a war zone while fighting for survival. Of course the Abrams needed a doctrinal timeout. Of course they took losses when forced to operate without the full American symphony. Now, with Australian M1A1s reinforcing and counter-drone gear flowing, expect the Abrams to reappear like a boss battle you thought you'd beaten, just with better shields and backup singers. So how are tanks actually being used in late 2025? Think deeper hides, shorter dashes, and pre-registered kill zones. Tanks and IFVs set up in camouflaged revetments 2 to 3 kilometers behind the line, ready to pop out for 20 seconds, kill, and disappear. Armored companies synchronize with electronic warfare teams to create 10 to 15 minute windows where drones go blind. Artillery and loitering munitions suppress likely enemy observers. Engineers thread mines and obstacles to channel any Russian push into enfiladed fire. When armor does move forward, it's with UAV overwatch stacked to the stratosphere, cheap FPVs to scout ditches, larger quads to map mine belts, and fixed-wing ISR to watch for ambushes. If that sounds exhausting, it is. It's also how you keep a 60-ton asset alive long enough to matter. There's also a quiet revolution inside the tanks. Crews are bolting on thermal shrouds, exhaust diffusers, and IR camouflage nets to reduce signature. Units experiment with decoy turrets and false heat sources to lure FPVs. Even more important, gunners are relearning the old art of indirect fire. No, tanks aren't howitzers, but with ballistic tables, stabilized guns, and modern sights, they can lob accurate HE at known coordinates from defilade, punishing trench lines without peeking over the ridge. That hybrid role, sniper at noon, mortar at dusk, keeps the enemy guessing and preserves holds for the moments that count. Does any of this mean tanks are back? Here's the grown-up answer. Tanks never left. The character of the battlefield changed. Everyone else is trying to catch up. Drones won't vanish. ECM won't be perfect. APS won't swat every threat. But armor still delivers 3 non-negotiables: shock, protected mobility, and precision direct fire under armor. Infantry love a tank nearby when they're crossing a lethal field. Commanders love a mobile 120mm gun that can erase a strong point right now. Even Russians who mock Western tank losses still mass their own armor when they sense a breach, because there is no substitute for fast steel when the line finally bends. Let's zoom out to the industrial and strategic picture. Europe is rearming with a purpose Germany hasn't shown since the Cold War, signing for 2 A8s, Patriots, artillery lines, and munitions at wartime tempo, while pushing a brigade to Lithuania with modern armor. Spain resumed shipments. Denmark and the Netherlands paid for refurbished Leopards rather than just sending thoughts and prayers. And industry is creeping forward in Ukraine itself. Repair hubs for Leopard families, talk of local assembly for IFVs. Because shipping hulls across borders for every fix is slow, expensive, and sometimes impossible under fire. If the West wants Ukraine to keep its heavy brigades alive, the armourer's bench has to move closer to the fight. Meanwhile, Russia, never count them out, has leaned into mass. It is refurbishing old hulls at scale and learning to feed the front with a brutal rhythm of artillery, glide bombs, and small assault groups probing for seams. Where its armour surges, it does so under the cover of overwhelming indirect fire and thick drone ISR. Exactly the ecosystem Ukraine is building for itself. That's why Western armour holds value beyond the kill count. It forces Russia to prepare for armoured counters, to keep ATGMs, drones, and artillery tubes constantly staged. Those are resources not spent elsewhere. Strategic war is a budget. Tanks make the enemy spend. Now the big question, the one that eats defense committees for breakfast. If drones dominate, why not ditch tanks and go all in on quadcopters and missiles? Because in war, you need trump cards for different suits. Drones find, fix, and finish, but they don't seize and hold. And when a town needs clearing, or a trench line won't break under airbursts, someone has to drive forward, under armour, and kick the door in. Tanks are that promise. Not invulnerable, just irreplaceable in their moment. The trick is making those moments survivable with electronic warfare, APS, counter-drone guns, smoke that hides in multiple spectra, and tactics that treat exposure like a precious commodity. 3 quick flashpoints to watch as this story continues. First, the normalization of hard-kill APS on Western tanks in Ukrainian service. When Leopard 2s and Abrams routinely field trophy-class defenses, the drone ATGM equation tilts back a notch. Second, the maturation of battlefield EW. When brigades can switch off hostile FPVs across a 10-kilometer front for 20 minutes on cue, you'll see armor breathe again. Third, the pace of industrial sustainment inside Ukraine. Repair lines that turn battle damaged into back in 2 weeks, instead of back in 2 months. That last one isn't sexy, but it wins wars. A note on expectations. People wanted the Western tank story to be a Hollywood arc. Arrive, charge, triumph. Instead, it's a grindhouse flick, with rewrites on set. The heroes don't die, they adapt. Tanks still break trench lines, but only when the orchestra plays. Drones scouting, jammers humming, engineers cutting, artillery singing, and air defenses catching the knives in the air. It's slower, it's smarter, it's more lethal, and it's still armour. So where does that leave Ukraine's Western tanks in November 2025? In the fight, just differently. Leopard 1A5S filled the quick-fire, quick-dash niche. Leopard 2s remain the backbone when massed steel is required under tight overwatch. Challenger 2s deliver pinpoint pain, where their small numbers and sustainment allow. Abrams step forward when the tactical window opens and the protective bubble is real, bolstered now by Australia's incoming fleet. None of them are silver bullets. All of them are silver hammers when the nails line up. A Ukrainian tank troop in a wooded hide at dusk, turrets masked, engines cold. Overhead, a lattice of friendly drones. In the tree line ahead, a Russian assault group assembles, believing they're unseen. The brigade EW team flicks a switch, enemy FPVs stutter. The artillery fires a curtain 2 kilometers deep. The tanks surge for 27 seconds. 2 volleys, 4 targets, back into shadow, while a dozen quadcopters chase down the survivors. It's not blitzkrieg, it's choreography with claws. The tank isn't dead, it got a new job description and a meaner office.